Happy Tuesday, happy fall, happy October. We are so excited to be with you today. We're going to get started in just a few moments. Those that are tuning in, do us a favor and just put it into the comment section below so we can shout you out. We have an amazing panelist or guest speaker with us today who is going to speak to us about teen issues, teen dating, and we might even be able to jump into some issues on human trafficking. So this is going to be a very intense and informative, insightful talk. We want you to be a part of it. Stay until the end and share this message wide. We're going to give a few moments to allow others to join in before starting. And until then, please feel free to put in the chat box, where are you joining from? Hey, Arlene, great to see you. Thank you for joining us. You can put it into the chat box. We'll start in just a few moments. We want to, yes, absolutely, mental health and domestic violence. Yeah, this is a huge, huge topic right here, and um, we want to raise awareness. We've been talking about mental health for the last month and a half, I believe, or 2 months, and we've been digging deep into this topic of mental health. We're going to go even deeper. We're going to be talking about domestic violence, but we'll be dedicating the month of October to women. So um, this month will be all about women. We'll be dealing with women issues. And on the topic of mental health, we'll continue digging deeper into that. So thank you so much for joining us. All right. Because of time, we are going to just jump in and get started. So, again, we are so excited. It's October, y'all. Oh, my goodness. I cannot believe that the year is really moving so fast. We're at the end of the year, and we thought it not robbery to dig deeper, as I mentioned a few moments ago, into the topic of mental health and domestic violence. October is dedicated specifically to women. And so we'll be dealing with women issues. And we know that domestic violence doesn't have a gender because it can show up in any gender. However, we understand that research does demonstrate and show statistically that women are most impacted by domestic violence. And so, this is the reason why we're dedicating the month of October to women. Today we have an amazing guest with us, and I'm so excited to have Delaney Dickey. She was actually one of our guests last year at our Love Doesn't Hurt panel. I believe it was last year, it could have been 2 years ago. We had an amazing panel where we brought women together that shared their stories on domestic violence and their unique perspectives and lived experiences. And we learned and gleaned from these amazing women. So we're excited to have Delaney back this year. She'll be talking to us specifically on the issues of dating and relationships. This is a good one, and signs to look out for. We'll be talking also about how that looks on social media and how social media can also impact relationships. So I would like to formally introduce Delaney. She is a first-year student at Pepperdine University. She is majoring in international studies with an emphasis in global politics. In the future, Delaney would like to attend law school to work towards becoming an immigration lawyer. That's awesome. Throughout high school, Delaney served as the president of Arizona's Governor's Youth Commission, where she completed many projects surrounding domestic violence and human trafficking awareness, which included hosted an awareness dance, providing training to teachers, organizing expert speakers at her school, and even running drives, including journals and Christmas cards for the Phoenix Dream Center and a hygiene drive for the local domestic violence shelter against Abuse Incorporated, which collected over $13,000 worth of items. Delaney also spoke about the dangers of teen dating violence at Arizona Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family event. lighting Arizona purple in October of 2021. That is great. So Delaney has been doing amazing work. She's a young activist and a future lawyer and a future immigration lawyer, and has been doing amazing work around domestic violence. Delaney, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Um, let's dig right into it. Tell us about your work from your experience, more about your work, and sort of what has inspired you in this work.
So I think that the biggest thing that inspired me is I came into the Arizona Governor's Youth Commission when I was a sophomore, and I was assigned to raising awareness for human trafficking and domestic violence, and I had no idea what that meant. I was 15 years old, and these weren't words I was ever exposed to. And so learning about these topics and being able to become more comfortable talking about these topics was really eye-opening. And it was eye-opening that this wasn't ever something that I was talked about before, especially since so many young people fall into that problem and are affected by these problems. So to not be able to talk about it and to not have those resources ever spoken to me prior to being on that awareness group committee, it was really concerning for me. And so it really just sparked that passion to be able to break the taboo about these topics.
That's really very, very commendable. So you actually started as a young activist at the age of 15 years old. That's amazing.
Yes,
How, if you don't mind me asking, we're not supposed to ask ages if you're you're comfortable with sharing. How young are you?
I'm 18 years old.
That's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen and audience, we have an 18-year-old activist and expert that's going to teach us about teen dating and healthy relationships. I'm excited. Delaney, tell us what are some of the major issues that you've seen amongst teenagers and are in today's generation. What have you noticed as a teenager, as a young activist? What are some of the things that you have noticed as prevalent issues in today's time amongst teenagers?
I think, like we already just touched on, social media is such a big problem. There's so many benefits of social media, and I'm overlook those, but there's so many downsides. And even just being able to share your location via Snapchat and having that be an expectation is so concerning because it's no longer something that people even think about. It's just something that's expected. So when it's not there, people get really frustrated. More than that, we have the problem of jealousy and jealousy with social media. I know so many different relationships and so many different friends have to like unfollow boys once they get a boyfriend. And that's so concerning because people have such easy access to see who people are following and who people are trying to stay in touch with. And it's concerning that people are inputting themselves into that aspect of other people's life. And what's more concerning than that is people are being impacted by this. And people are thinking that it's cute, and people are thinking that he cares or she cares, and that's why there's that jealousy. And I think that it's becoming so normalized in our culture and in our society that people aren't seeing that it's a problem anymore. So where in the past, if somebody was like, "Oh, you have to share your location with me, and you have to share your passwords," it might have raised some red flags, and people might have been concerned. But now it's becoming so normalized and so prevalent that people are thinking it's cute, and people are thinking that it's something that every relationship does and every relationship has.
That's so you said some really important, made some really important points, Delaney. You talked about the sharing of location and that being an expectation in relationships among teenagers. But I would say even adults may have even adopted that pattern, that behavior that it is expected for you to share location. Can you tell more about where does that stem from your perspective, and how that may impact a person's well-being or a person's mental health in a relationship?
Yes, for sure. So I think that especially as teens, you're not able to really think about the consequences of your actions. You can share your location with somebody because you think that it's going to be safer make your relationship more stable, but then you don't realize that that person might be focusing on that location and might be checking your location. So when you're a place out of the ordinary or you tell them you're busy and they check your location, and then you're in that trap. You're in that place where you don't know how to get out of it necessarily. And I think that that goes back to mental health. And you think about how much pressure it puts on a relationship. Relationships aren't supposed to be sacrificial, maybe in some sense, but not in that sense. And it's not, you're not supposed to have to sacrifice your mental health. And by sharing location, you have to like second check yourself and you have to always make sure you're in the right places. And you always have to make sure that if you say you're busy, you're not just at the movies with some of your other friends. It takes away the fun of a relationship. And I totally acknowledge that not all relationship is fun. Relationships are work and relationships can be hard, but the love and the affection for other people shouldn't be the hard and it shouldn't be stressful and it shouldn't hurt in the end.
My goodness, Delaney, you are, I mean, just on fire in terms of the points that you are making here. And you said love should not feel stressful. It should not be at the expense of your mental health. And especially when you are a teenager, where you're an adolescent, and when you are still growing, your brain has not fully developed. In fact, neuroscience actually states that our brain doesn't fully develop into the age of 25. So you have many years to go before your brain is fully developed. And so prior to that, when you're engaging in relationships that may put this burden on you to share your location, and to do these things that are really unrealistic to keep up with, it does have a toll on your emotional well-being and on your mental health. um, you know in fact, I'm thinking of a specific story that happened recently, keeping names confidential, where a young lady had actually got into a physical altercation with her boyfriend, and she's 17 years old, but had got into a physical altercation when she realized that he wasn't where he said he was going to be, and pulled up to his location because he was sharing it and he was at a party with his friends. um and she ended up falling, almost had a concussion. Thankfully she did not, but did have to go to the hospital. And so how that caused, and the cops were called and so forth, but how that incident in itself, just by sharing location, how that caused so much emotional harm, and essentially physical harm as well, to her and to her partner. And so I'm wondering what advice you might have, or that you may give to those that are your age, that are adolescents, that are requiring their partners to share their location, and is telling their partners, if you don't share location, you don't love me, or whatever the tactics may be that they're using. What advice would you give to those that are in that predicament or that situation?
Yes. So this all comes back to like some cheesy saying that relationships are supposed to be fun. There is that hard work and there is that aspect of having to put in work into a relationship, but especially as young adults and teenagers are dating, relationships are to see who you met and that sort of thing. And so remembering who you are and what you value is so important. All too often, especially with social media, we see people and young adults and teenagers sacrificing parts of themselves and compromising themselves to get a relationship. Especially in young women, we see a lot of women wanting a boyfriend so bad that it's okay for her to forget certain key traits of herself and to compromise and give in on a couple of things. And so I think that just remembering that relationships are supposed to be for you. There's that selfish aspect of you start dating someone because you think that they are good for you. And when they're no longer good for you, you know that it's not your time. It's not your responsibility, especially as young adults and teenagers, to try to fix other people because
Mm.
relationships are selfish in that aspect. And I know that that's so much easier said than done because you start to like someone and you start to feel that affection towards them and you want the best for them. And so it's so much easier to say to just stick up for yourself and to be yourself and remember to love yourself first but that is the end goal, and it is a lot of work, and it is not as easy as it sounds, but that is the main piece of advice.
I love it. And it isn't as easy as it sounds because to value yourself is it is a process, and some people may even go through life well into their adult years and may not value who they are, may not value themselves. And so that idea of valuing yourself is really crucial, but the process to get to that place is very could be a long journey. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little more about some of the other unhealthy signs in a relationship that you have noticed in your work or as a teenager that you can also speak to? What are some of the other, you talked about the going into your partner's page and requiring them to unfollow people, requiring them to share location. What are some other signs that you have noticed in terms of an unhealthy relationship that you've noticed as teens and as a young woman?
So, especially in college, I see a lot of jokes being made at the expense of other people's partners, and I think that that's really concerning because people are okay with it and people, like, try to laugh it off, but you can tell that it hurt, and I think that that fear of sticking up again for yourself and that fear of saying, "Hey, that hurt my feelings," is really concerning because one joke leads to more jokes, and then it becomes normalized, and then you have to be okay with it because it's already gone on for so long. And that's concerning just because how long can you let somebody say something that hurts your feelings until you start to truly believe it? And then it is impacting your mental health. And then it's making that relationship no longer a safe place for you. And it's making it a place that you feel scared about yourself and you feel self conscious and you no longer feel like you're just loved and supported in that relationship, which is really what all relationships should be ideally.
So you're speaking, it sounds like what you're speaking of is emotional and verbal abuse. Is that correct? So tell me, what does it look like? What are some examples of what verbal or emotional abuse may look like, and how would that show up in a relationship?
So I see a lot of like around campus, I see a lot of people making jokes about appearance and saying like, "Oh, your hair is so messy," and making jokes about just other things that can be changed in theory, but shouldn't feel like they are obligated to change in order to stay in that relationship. There's also some jokes about, especially in front of other people, like when they make jokes in front of their friends just because they feel like they are coming off cooler than when they do that, and that's concerning in itself. I've also heard a lot of jokes about just traits about them. Somebody can be like, "Oh, you're so annoying," and it starts out small, and it seems so small and minuscule in the scheme of things, but only so many times can you hear that before you start to believe it, and before you start to feel like that's all you are.
Absolutely, and I think you nailed it. You said it starts off very small. I do want to operationalize the definition of verbal abuse. It is actually a type of psychological and mental abuse, and it involves the use of oral or written language, excuse me, directed to a victim. And so, verbal abuse can include harassing, labeling, insulting, scolding, rebuking, excessive yelling towards an individual. And so um it's important to put the definition to that because sometimes people may not realize that they're in a relationship that is abusive. And the thing about verbal abuse, and I talk about this a lot when we're discussing domestic violence, is it tends to be the type of abuse that's invisible. You can't see verbal abuse, you can't see emotional abuse physically because it doesn't leave physical scars, but science and social science actually states that emotional and verbal abuse can be more deadly than physical abuse because of the scars emotionally that it leaves, and it can actually lead to trauma. So verbal abuse and emotional abuse is it should not be taken lightly, but it is real, and so it does show up very sometimes in subtle forms, and sometimes it doesn't always show up grandiose. It starts very small, and then it starts to build. But there are detrimental effects to verbal and mental abuse on the well-being and the mental health of any person in any relationship. And so not just in romantic relationships, but also in family relationships or friends or work relationships. If you are undergoing or sustaining verbal or emotional abuse, it will impact your mental health and it can lead to trauma. And also, depending on how long and the severity of that abuse, it can also lead to complex trauma or complicated trauma. So it's a real issue, and we definitely have to take it very, very serious. Delaney, are there any other signs that we should be looking out for in terms of what an unhealthy relationship looks like, is specifically in the realm of social media?
I think that anything that makes the relationship feel taxing, anything that makes you tired to go to that person, anything that makes you even a little bit uncomfortable is worth looking at. I am a firm believer that what you feel is probably what's happening. And so if you're uncomfortable with absolutely anything that's happening in a relationship, I think that it's definitely something to talk about. There's no such thing as being overdramatic if you're uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, and there's value to that. And there's value to feeling uncomfortable, and there's value to talk about talking about being uncomfortable because there's so much power in being able to advocate for that, even if you're scared that you'll come off silly. There's definitely been times where my friends are like feel like they're being over dramatic or reading too much into things. But being uncomfortable is being uncomfortable. And being able to say that put so much power into the person that is advocating for themselves.
You said it very nicely. It's advocating for yourself. It's telling your that other person what you're feeling and how you feel. And I think just that advocacy piece is important, but it's also something that has to be done on a case by case basis, especially depending on really what's going on in that relationship. If that person's safety is in danger, for example, if there's going to be retaliation against that person for verbalizing what they feel, um, in a form of physical abuse or physical harm or even emotional retaliation, then that person would really need to be prepped or really shouldn't be in a relationship at all with that person if they're going to go through retaliation, in terms of expressing how they feel. But that is something that we need to also educate and inform our young people and adolescents and just anyone on relationships. It is the practice of advocating for yourself, is standing up for you and what you're comfortable with and what your values are, what your principles are as well, because you matter and they matter. We are winding up. I only have a few moments here, but I want us to also get a chance to talk about what does a healthy relationship look like. In your experience and in your work, I know you've done great work on domestic violence and signs of healthy and unhealthy relationships. Can you tell us a little from your standpoint, what does a healthy relationship look like?
Yes. So once again, going back to a cheesy classic little quote, I am a firm believer that the healthiest types of relationships are the relationships where you guys are just each other's best friend. When you go into a relationship, you should feel rejuvenated and you should feel happy and content with yourself. You should feel confident. You shouldn't feel like you're trying to appease anybody or reach that standard that might appear unreachable. And so I think that just having that support system is so important in a relationship, and that's so healthy. More than that, feeling like you could go to them if something makes you uncomfortable and you're not afraid to stand up for yourself is also so key in a relationship.
Absolutely, and I love that you talked about that concept of fear. If you are afraid to stand up for yourself in that relationship, that would be a sign of the relationship being unhealthy. In relationships, you should be able to stand up for yourself. You should be able to verbalize what you're feeling. I'll also just hit on a few other um, points in terms of signs of a healthy relationship. One of the signs is respecting each other, respecting your partner, and your partner respecting you. Understanding that each of you are unique people with individual interests and needs. And so you may not always agree on the same things as your partner. Valuing and respecting each other's differences is important, and that is a sign of a healthy relationship. Also trusting one another, so the ability to trust your partner trusting you, communicating well, being able to speak your mind, like you mentioned, Delaney, being able to hear what your partner is saying, even when they tell you something that may not be pleasant. Being able to hear that, and couples just being able to express themselves both ways. Having that open two-way communication and not being afraid to do so. Being committed is also a sign of a healthy relationship. Showing commitment on both ends. This one is huge, but often overlooked. Being kind to one another. So caring and compassion, and just being kind to each other, even when you don't agree on something. Enjoying each other's company, supporting each other's goals, making decisions together, and then also having the friends and family support as well, if that's a part of what you desire, and then feeling supported and cared for. So those are some quick, healthy signs of a relationship. However, there are many other ones out there. Those are the ones that I just wanted to go over quickly. I think that in connecting this to our mental health, we're thinking of being in relationships. Relationships, they really do take a lot from you in terms of sacrificing and giving. When you are in a relationship that is unhealthy, it can impact your well-being and mental health in many ways. It can lead to mental health issues such as anxiety, increases in depression, increases in suicide ideation, or even in suicide. So, unhealthy relationships can lead to severe mental health challenges. So, it's important that we are looking out for the signs of what an unhealthy and healthy relationship looks like. Delaney, is there anything that you like to add to that?
I do not think so, I think you got it all.
Well, your feedback and your input is definitely valued, and very important, especially as a youth activist. What are some ways that we can really raise awareness on this more within our homes? So, parents may be afraid to talk to their teenagers and adolescents about this. What advice may you give as an adolescent to a parent that may not feel comfortable talking to their teen or adolescent, excuse me, about this topic?
Yes, I think that that's such a great question because there are so many things. Just having that taboo in a household and not wanting to talk about relationships at all is so awful for detrimental towards relationships in general. Just because teens are going to date. I know that most parents don't want to think that, but teens are going to, and it's going to happen. And so avoiding that conversation is so detrimental because teens are going to just try to figure it out themselves. And what they're seeing is relationships in movies and relationships in media and relationships in songs. And most of those relationships are not good. Most of those relationships are not healthy and are toxic, but that's what they're seeing and that's what they're basing their relationships off of. And so breaking that taboo and just openly discussing healthy versus unhealthy relationships, controlling versus cute behaviors, that sort of thing is so vastly important because that's what a teenager and young adult is going to base their relationships off of. And so just talking about it, being open about it, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable, is so important.
That's great advice, Delaney. I think parents feel like avoiding the conversation helps to delay their teen dating, but like you said, teens are going to date, and so they're going to find the information from somewhere, and most likely the information that they're finding may not be the most healthy information. You don't want your child to learn through a rap song or through a music video or through a television show. You want them to learn directly from you. And parents, we have stories to tell our teens, right? We may not be as forthcoming and transparent about the things that we also overcame and endured when we were adolescents and teenagers, but it's important that we are being transparent and candid with our children. And for those that are social workers and mental health experts, and those that work, youth advocates, and those that work with young people, it is a conversation that we should be continually having. Um, I remember a client that I had not too long ago that actually was in a domestic violence relationship. She was an adolescent, and I think she was 15 years old. But this, excuse me, particular client, her partner actually leaked a video, a very inappropriate video of them two on the internet, and she immediately wanted to kill herself. And so these are real things that happen that every day. That you talked about social media, how social media is used to weaponize and to manipulate and control and to harm young people and relationships, and not just young people, but also in general. I think adults use these tactics as well. We see it with adults, we see it with youth. It's really, I don't think it has any age. It may be a little more prevalent amongst youth, but we also see it used with adults as well. And so, using social media as a way to harm and to weaponize against the ones that you are supposed to be in a relationship with can lead to serious mental health issues. And one of them is suicide. So we have to be very keen to what's going on. Parents must be keen. Those that are working with young people, whether in schools or in nonprofits, must also be aware of the tactics and things that happen. Sometimes we have no clue. I can tell you how many times when I've met with principals and I've asked, "What's your number one issue?" Do you know what I've heard? Just take a guess, Delaney. Your number one issue,
Mental health?
just amongst mental health, right? Or with your students. The number one issue has been social media. Social media has been the number one issue of every principal that I have spoken to in New York City about what's going on with their students. People, kids and adolescents consistently using this as a platform, and how it really does impact their well-being and their mental health. So we got to continue this conversation, but we don't have enough time today, Delaney. I know we talked about before going live bringing you back in so we can deal with issues of human trafficking. I think that is a very important topic to talk about, and we want to bring you back to dig deeper into this issue. We didn't get to touch on it today, but to touch on it and dig deeper. So we are going to keep our promise and bring you back on. But we are at time, and we appreciate you, Delaney. We thank you for your expertise, for your wisdom, and your youthfulness, and all the work that you are doing around this issue. We want to encourage you to keep going forward, to continue empowering this generation. Your voice is so necessary and needed, and we thank you for being with us and sharing this space with us, Delaney.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Any words of advice that you want to leave before our time, before ending?
I think I'm just going to reiterate the idea that the taboo is not benefiting anybody and that breaking the taboo is so important. So if you know anybody, or even just if you don't think you know anybody, just talk about having healthy relationships. It is not as scary as it sounds.
Absolutely. And I think just ending on that, if you are watching this and you believe that you are in an unhealthy or unsafe relationship, we do want you to contact. There is a national hotline that you can contact. We'll put it in the link below, the national hotline to contact if you are in a domestic violence relationship, or you are in a domestic violence situation, or if you know someone. You can also contact one of the counselors and just speak to them and get advice. They may not be ready to speak right away, but if you notice that there may be a loved one that, or a friend or family member or colleague that might be in a relationship that is unhealthy or abusive or unsafe, there are steps that you can take, and we'll continue talking about that throughout the month of October. So we'll put that number someone, if someone from iRaise can get that number and throw it into the chat box, that would be great. And you can also follow up with one of us. We also provide mental health services, and if you are in the New York City area or in the Metro Atlanta area, we may or may not be able to work with your program or with your school. So you can also reach out to us. Our number is 718-725-8996. Um, excuse me, there we have it on the screen. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is up there. That number is 1-800-799-7233. You can also reach out to our agency if you are interested in us providing mental health support or services to your young people or to your teens. Our number is 718-725-8996. Our time is up. Delaney, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you all for watching and for continuing to support these fireside chats. We want to continue getting the message out. So please do share this message out, leave some comments below, give us some feedback, and tell us how you felt about our chat. We will be back on Thursday with our guest, Alyssa Abernathy. She will be returning. She is one of our guests that we had last month, but we bring her back again. She'll be talking, we'll be digging deeper into mental health and domestic violence. So stay tuned and stay connected. Thank you all so much. Stay safe, and we'll see you again soon.